We usually don't share any of our NCRO members' personal information with anyone. However, as a public service to our members, I thought it was important that I share a recent story that I heard with you. It seems, as reported to me, the wife of one of our members visited her doctor and talked to her about her husband's sex drive, which apparently had gone dormant and been dormant for a while. So the doctor told her, he said, well, why don't you try Viagra? And she just said, no, not a chance. He won't even take an aspirin, let alone Viagra. And the doctor says, well, that's not a problem. He said, we'll do an Irish Viagra. And she goes, what's an Irish Viagra? He says, this is what you do. So I'll give you some pills and you dissolve it in his morning coffee. He won't even taste it. He won't even know it's there. So he handed her some pills and she left. And he said, please let me know how it turns out. So the next afternoon, she frantically calls the doctor and the doctor says, how did it go? She goes, oh my God, it was terrible. It was terrible. He goes, well, what happened? Did you do as I told you? She says, yes, I did just as you suggested. I dissolved the pill, the Viagra in his coffee, and he didn't taste it, but as you know, the reaction was just immediate. He jumped up from the table with a twinkle in his eye, a smile on his face, just took everything off the table, cups, saucers on the floor, tore my clothes to tatters, put me on the table and made mad, passionate love to me right there on the table. And the doctor says, well, what's wrong? Wasn't the sex good? She goes, oh, no. The sex was fantastic. Probably the best I've had in a long, long time. Said, but problem is I'll never be able to show my face in Starbucks again.
Morning, all right. It seems one of our very own retirees went to church one Sunday. That's a story in itself probably, but that's another time. But the priest saw him and he almost fainted when he saw this guy because he hadn't been in church for so long. So after the service, the priest ran and caught up with the guy and said, man, it's really good to see you. What made you come here? He said, well, Father, I got to be honest with you. I lost my hat a while back, and I really, really love that hat. But I know a good friend of mine had the same hat, and I know that he comes to church here every Sunday. So I figured I would come to church, and I knew that when he came to church, he would have to take his hat off. He would hang it up in the back, and my plan was that I would leave around communion. On the way out, I would steal his hat. The priest said, well, I see you didn't steal his hat. What changed your mind? And he said, well, when I heard your sermon about the 10 Commandments, that really changed my mind. The priest said, yeah, when I talked about thou shalt not steal, you thought maybe you'd rather not take the hat and then commit a sin. He said, well, Father, no, that wasn't really it. Although that was a good part of your sermon, it was when you talked about thou shalt not commit adultery. Suddenly I remembered where I left my hat. All right, yeah, okay.
But before we start, my good friend Dale, who is in vacation in Hawaii right now, just told me that he saw an old lady pulled over on the side of the road for speeding. Is there a problem, officer? She said. Ma'am, you were speeding, said the officer. Oh, I see. Can I see your license, please? I'd give it to you, but I don't have one. Don't have one? No, I lost it 4 years ago for drunk driving. I see. Can I see your vehicle registration papers, please? I can't do that. And why not? I stole this car. Stole it? Yes, and I killed and hacked up the owner. You what? His body parts are in plastic bags in the trunk if you want to see. The officer looked at the woman and slowly backed away from the car and quickly called for backup. Within 5 minutes, 5 police cars came screaming down the street and circled the car. The senior officer slowly approached the car, clasping his half-drawn gun. "Ma'am, can you please step out of your vehicle?" The woman stepped out of the car. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Officer Harris just told me that you have stolen this car and murdered the owner." "Murdered the owner?" "Yes, can you please open the trunk of your car?" The woman opened up the trunk and revealed nothing but an empty trunk. The senior officer was quite stunned. "He also claimed that you do not have a driver's license." The woman dug into her handbag and pulled out her license and handed it to the officer. The officer examined it carefully and looked quite puzzled. "Thank you, ma'am. Officer Harris told me that you didn't have a license, that you stole the vehicle, and you murdered and hacked up the owner." "I bet the liar told you that I was speeding too."
Really tired this morning. Really tired this morning. Not as tired as yesterday morning, though. I got up late, 6 a.m. I guess that's late by retired standards, you know. And I kind of half awake, I walked into the kitchen, and my wife was already in the kitchen, and she was at the stove preparing our normal breakfast, soft-boiled eggs, and a couple toast. And she looked at me and said, "I need to make love to you right now, and I mean right now." I went, what? And so she grabbed me, threw me down on the floor, and made mad, passionate love to me. Well, when we were done, or maybe when I was done, but she comes first. So she got up, said thanks, went back to the stove, and I'm laying there just confused, and it's like, Dad, I'm sorry, what was that all about? And as she's pulling the soft-boiled eggs out of the pan, she looked at me and she said, "I had to do it, our 8-timers broke."
Story about a pilot named Bob. I think it's a different Bob, but this Bob had an old airplane, and he would be outside the Iowa State Fair every year giving airplane rides for $10. And there was this older couple, George and Martha. They attended the state fair every year. They were farmers, and they'd go to the state fair every year. And every year, George would pause by the plane with Bob and be interested in the plane ride. And Martha would say, "No, George, we can't do that. That's $10, and $10 is $10. So poor George, he'd nod and they'd go on into the fair. And this went on, excuse me, this went on year after year. Every year George would bring it up and Martha would say, no, George, or no, excuse me, yeah, no, George, we can't do this. It's $10, and $10 is $10. Well, Bob the pilot, after a few years, he noticed them coming by. So one year he called them over. He says, "You guys are giving up in years." He says, "Why don't you take an airplane ride?" And they said, "You always hesitate." He said, "Well, Martha says $10 is $10. He says, so Bob says, "Well, here's what I'll do. I'll give you a ride for free, but you got to promise not to say anything or talk or make any noise. Just take the ride." So Martha thought about it, and well, $10 is $10. We'll do it. So Bob figured he's going to get up there and give them a ride of their life and make them scream, yell, or talk, or say something. So they get up in the air, and Bob's doing these turns, these flips, these dips, rolls, whatever the terms are, and just all kinds of aerobatics, just all over the place, but not a peep from him. So Bob gives up. He lands the plane. Says over his shoulder, "Boy, I thought for sure I'd get you guys to say something." And George says, "Well, I thought about saying something when Martha fell out, but $10 is $10.
It seems there were these two women. They were playing golf, and the first one teed off, And she watched in horror as her ball was just sailing towards a foursome of men that were in front of him at the next hole. And she just screamed when the ball hit the one golfer. He claps his hands together down by his groin and just fell to the ground in pain. Yeah, what a win. Anyways, so she immediately, they jumped to the cart, went over, and she went up to the foursome and just talking to the golfer that got hit, and just, I'm so sorry. And he said, no, it's okay, it's okay. He says, is there anything I can do? I'm a trained physical therapist. I can relieve your pain. And he said, no, it'll be okay, but she insisted. So he finally said, okay. So she just kind of laid him on his back and put his hands to his side, and she began tenderly and professionally massaging his groin area. I don't know what you're thinking. So after a few minutes, she said, how does that feel? He says, well, he looked up at her and said, well, it feels good, but I think my thumb's still broken. Yeah, something about, there was a big football game a few weeks ago. And it just reminded me that a friend of mine happened to win a free ticket to the Super Bowl at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Mercedes-Benz. There's something about that, I remember. Anyways, so my buddy won this free ticket to the Super Bowl, and he was really excited. He couldn't wait to get there. So he gets to the stadium, and yeah, just like any other free thing, right? He's way up in the rafters. He could hardly see the field. So he's looking around and happens to see this empty seat right down next to the field. So he makes his way down there, and he kind of shuffles into the row, and there was this, senior woman sitting in the chair next to him, the seat next to it, and he says, excuse me, is this seat taken? And she goes, no, go ahead, have a seat. So he sits down, and he says, wow, I can't believe that this seat is vacant. Nobody's sitting here. And she goes, yeah, unfortunately, that was my husband's seat, and we had been to every Super Bowl since we had been married. And he said, well, what happened? He said, well, I'm sorry, but he had passed away. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But you couldn't get a friend or a relative to come and fill the seat? She goes, no, everyone's at the funeral.
I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me that he was preparing everything, getting everything ready for his funeral. And one of the things that he told me he was doing is that he had written to the Detroit Lions and asked for them to send 8 players to be his pallbearers. And I said, why do you want Detroit Lions players to be your pallbearers? He said he just wanted the Lions to let him down one more time. Just continuing that theme, a couple of years ago, maybe about 5, I was at a Lions-Vikings game, and as we came out, I saw this gentleman right in front of me wearing the best Lions jersey I've ever seen. It was number 57, and the name across the top was Waiting Since. Great shirt.
Good morning, everyone. You know, it seems this happened just a few days ago when I was at church. There were 3 guys before the service, and they were chatting. 2 of them were retired seniors. If I recall, 2 of them were NCRO members, and then the third guy was he belonged to one of the local unions, and they were talking about their injuries and and just their ailments that they had. So God heard this, and he came down. I saw this. I was there, and he came down and says, "Tell me your problems." The first guy says, Lord, I cannot stand up straight. I can't move. It's due to a back problem that I had many years ago. So he just kind of, God waves his hands. Guy gets up, jumps up, starts doing somersaults and everything, and it's like, man, that's great, thank you. Second guy sees this and says, well, I haven't been able to see. I've been blind, in the one eye, and it's a struggle every day to get through. Guy takes his glasses, just crumples them, throws them away, and all of a sudden the guy can see with perfect 20/20 vision. And the third guy, the union guy, is looking at this and says, hold on, Lord, stop, please. I'm on personal disability, don't touch me.
Good morning, everyone. It seems there was this man that was stranded on a desert island. He was stranded on there for about 10 years. So one day he's looking out over the ocean. He sees a small speck out there, and it's like, wow, man, it's like, that's too small for a ship. And it kept getting a little bit closer. It's not a boat or a raft either. So suddenly, out of the surf, out of the water, walks this just gorgeous young lady in a wetsuit and scuba gear. And she walks up to him, and they chit-chat for a little bit. And she asks him, how long's it been since you had a good cigar? And he says, it's been 10 years. She unzips her left sleeve, pulls out a dozen Cuban cigars, gives him one, lights it up. He goes, man, that is really, really great. So a little while, she goes, how long's it been since you had a sip of bourbon? He says, it's been 10 years. She unzips her waterproof sleeve on the right side, pulls out a flask of bourbon, gives him a drink. She says, man, this is really, really good. So then she starts unzipping the front of her wetsuit, and she asks him, how long has it been since you played around? And she goes, oh my God, you don't have a set of golf clubs in there, do you?
This Chrysler retiree and his wife, they run into his dentist's office, and the man says to the dentist, doctor, I'm in a hurry. I've got two buddies waiting out in my car. We're ready to go golfing. And so please, forget about the anesthetic. Just pull the tooth and let's get on with it. We have a 10 o'clock tea time. It's already 9:30. I just cannot wait for the anesthetic to work. So the dentist looks at him and says, wow, this guy's pretty brave. And what passion he must have for the game of golf to be able to endure this pain without anesthetic. So he says, all right. So the dentist asks the retiree, he says, all right, which tooth is it? The retiree looks at his wife and says, honey, open your mouth and show the doctor what tooth hurt you.
5 years old. I was married for 60 years. I have 4 kids, 11 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren. And last night, I had an affair. I made love all night to 2 young girls. Can you believe it? At 85 years old. She says, when was the last time you went to confession? And the guy says, well, to be honest with you, I've never been to confession. I'm not even Catholic. So then why are you telling me this story? He says, are you kidding me? I'm telling everybody this story.
Good morning, everyone. Man, it's so loud in here and so raucous. I didn't know if this was an NCRO breakfast meeting or a Donald Trump inauguration party. You're so crazy. Apparently it's an NCRO breakfast meeting. Anyways, it seems there were these 3 golfing partners, and I think they were retired seniors. Maybe some of you knew them, but unfortunately they passed away and they went up to heaven. And as they get up to heaven, they see just the most beautiful golf course they've ever seen. I mean, it's just gorgeous. While they're looking at it, St. Peter walks up. Can you hear me now? Okay. How about now? Okay. Anyways, while they're looking at this golf course, St. Peter walks up and says, welcome. And he says, you can do anything you want up here, play this golf course as many times as you want, but here's one rule. Within the first 3 months, don't hit a duck. And he looked and he's like, ducks? And he explains there's just thousands and thousands of ducks out on the golf course. Don't hit a duck. I said, okay. So next day they go out and they're teeing off and they're playing. And wouldn't you know it, about 15 minutes into the round, first guy hits a duck. And the warning was if you hit the first duck, he quacks, makes the second duck, quack, quack, and it just disrupts the whole tranquility of the whole thing. So once you know, he hits the duck, and here's this quacking racket just going on all over the place. Here comes St. Peter walking up. It's like, who hit the duck? And the guy raises, I hit the duck. I said, okay. So St. Peter had walked up with this just a very ugly woman. Okay, hang with me on this. Okay, so your punishment is I'm gonna handcuff you to this woman, and the two of you will spend the rest of eternity together. And he just walks off. The other two golfers look at each other and it's like, oh well. So later on that week, they're golfing, and they've gone 2 weeks or so. Wouldn't you know it, the second golfer hits a duck. Quack, quack, just quacking racket all over the place. St. Peter comes walking up. Who hit the duck? Oh, I did. Well.
We're sorry, we're having a little trouble.
Did you hear duck? So, walked up with an ugly woman, handcuffed the second guy to it, said, you're going to spend eternity with each other. It's like, okay. So now the third guy is really scared. So he goes up and he's very careful when he's golfing the next few weeks. There's sometimes that he doesn't even go out because he doesn't even want to nudge a duck. So he goes out there and he makes the 3 months without hitting a duck. St. Peter walks up with this just gorgeous, beautiful woman. And without saying a word, he handcuffs the third golfer to this gorgeous, beautiful woman and walks away. And the guy's looking and he says, wow, what did I do to deserve this? The young woman looks at him and says, I don't know about you, but I hit a duck.